Now is bring another friend of mine to the table, Derrick Machado, otherwise known as D. Hello, sir. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Well, how you doing, brother?
Doing pretty well, dude. I got to be honest. Yesterday, that show was amazing, man. Like, I had a great time, and just to learn more about you and your wife and the way that you all have done business, and gotta say, really impressed about your pivot.
Thank you, brother.
That was some really good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, I had a great show. I was talking about it all day yesterday, sending out I'm sharing it to everybody and seeing how
Right,
the feedback and I
right.
had a lot of fun, man. It was awesome.
Oh well, the cool part then that's beautiful because we're just gonna do it again. You ready? We're gonna do that all over again. Except today we're gonna talk a little bit about mental health.
Yes.
Mental health. Well, let me be clear because I am not a mental health practitioner, not a licensed clinician, and I know you and you're not either. All right.
No, no, I'm not.
So what we're doing, we're not going to delve into mental health, the diagnoses and the treatments. What I want to talk about where is the intersection of how you manage an entrepreneur's mindset
Mm-hmm.
because it's rough out here. I mean, it
100%.
is very difficult to kind of make a go out of this a lot of times because the resources you need may not be there.
Mm-hmm.
You have a great idea and you get ready to go for it, but there's always one more obstacle.
Yes.
You have everybody in your ear. Oh, you know what you should do? You should do this. Oh, I like that design, but you should do this. So your mindset becomes critical in your success. Has been my experiences coaching and working with entrepreneurs. Tell me a little bit about how you manage your mindset.
Um. Well, you know what? I've always been a strong-minded person all my life. Even as a kid, I was growing up where I grew up in the Bronx and Hudson County.
Mhm.
It's a rough neighborhood. So funny enough, I've never been one to engage in any type of smoking, any type of drinking. I just chose not to, and I'm saying that to say that even at a young age, I had a the mindset to be strong minded, and if I said no, no was no. And I think it's very important that you do that. Like you know who you are, you know
Mhm.
where your ground is, and you stick to it. So my parents also were very supportive of me. I was an
Mhm.
athlete when I was young, so if 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 I made a mistake on the field,
Mhm.
my father would literally be like, "Okay, what happened? Why did it happen? And let's talk about that."
Okay.
Instead of just being like you should have caught that, why weren't you focused? It was
Okay.
always a conversation, and I think
Mhm.
those conversations really allowed my mind to grow and for me to create a foundation in myself through those types of conversations opposed to just judgment.
Okay.
And yeah, even now I like when somebody messes up, I don't judge. I try to have them realize it.
Okay. So it sounds like from early on there was this whole idea around problem solving. It's like,
100%.
okay, you
Yeah, yeah.
ran into a situation, you had an expectation, you had an outcome you wanted, and it didn't work. Why? And as you broke down
Mhm.
that kind of problem solving, it gave you a lot more, I guess, resources to of your own, so that you can navigate those types of situations in the future.
Exactly.
Okay, okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So
See, I would like to say like some people think resources are just money or
right.
understand your resources are it's like your toolbox. Like what are you putting in your toolbox?
Mm-hmm.
And that toolbox is what you're going to carry with you throughout life. So whether it's quotes, whether it's a positive experience, whether it's someone's uplifting you and you want to remember what they said, it doesn't have to necessarily be something physical. So
Absolutely.
yeah, the resources, my toolbox was full.
Okay, so as you were thinking about the toolbox, and because it's really interesting because a lot of this is the kind of stuff that I work when I do my trainings and things like that on business planning and mindset. So, one of the things that we always do here at the morning show, shameless self promotion. Absolutely shameless self promotion, because if you're not going to tell your story, who is? So
100%. Yes,
my,
yes, yes, yes.
my company, the Grinding Gang, one of the things that we do is when we're doing our trainings, we really focus in on what you're talking about, that decision making process.
Yeah.
Because as a CEO, that's the only thing you really bring to the table is your decision making. Everybody, you can hire somebody to do everything else. You can get volunteers and the money doesn't change that, but you still have to make the decision. And it sounds like from a very early age, you were very certain in who you were and who you wanted to be, and had been kind of given the skills necessary to make the decisions to meet those places or to show up in those places the way you want it.
Yeah. Like it's always the little things to me. Like, for example, when I was young, like if we walked into a store, my father and I grabbed a Pepsi, instead of him saying, why would you drink that as juice or what, instead of judging the action, he would ask me, do athletes drink Pepsi? And I will, of course, I'm like 7 years old. I'm like, do they? and then he would start to explain, like, well, they actually drink water, and this is why.
Okay.
And so that I take into everything I do, like whatever business decision I make, I always try to break it down to the most minuscule negatives, because if you can figure out the negatives in the beginning, you have a better opportunity to go through them later on. So, and the reason why you point out the negatives in the beginning, it's good for your mental health, because when they come up later, you're not as stressed out, as anxious, as worried. Now you're like, wait, I thought about that before. I didn't think about a resolution. Let's stop for a minute now and let's do that.
Well, let me give you some pushback on that though, because that is absolutely something that you need to do, but that advice may not work well for everybody, because there are some people who that's all they do. Once they start down a rabbit hole of everything that can go wrong, their anxiety, depression, and those types of things kick in. So it sounds like not only have you found a way to do those types of kind of long-term or projective analysis, you've also found a way to keep yourself from going into this depressive spiral and rabbit hole. Is that accurate?
That's 100% accurate, because now to go back to what you're saying, you're absolutely correct. What the individual needs to do is evaluate themselves and see what works for them.
Gotcha.
So these things work for me. If someone tries it and they get stressed out, then that may not be the move for you. You're absolutely correct with that.
Okay.
What I did is I always take self-analysis, in any situation. Simple things like, we're going to go to the grocery store. Should I drive? Should I walk? And because in my mind, and I'm thinking, I drive a lot, so I'm going to walk to the store.
Right.
So to me, it's all that. I'm very analytical. And it's funny. My wife cracks up with me. She goes, I don't know how you can be so creative and analytical at the same time. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm an alien. I don't know.
One of the things that I is the work that I've been doing trauma-informed training and stuff like that, and doing a lot of research on mental health and how it intersects people's daily lives. One of the things that I've started to realize is that there are a lot of people who have what would normally be classified as a learning disability or something like that. But the real deal is that they actually just learn differently. It's not a disability, it's an ability that does not conform to this social structure. So if we want to talk about mindset and mental health a little bit, for me, we can't talk about it without adding education to the mix. Because a lot of the stuff that we learn about how to even engage the world, we get taught while we're in school.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I tell people is one of the earliest laws to mandatory public education was in the northeastern colonies back in the day. And it was designed, and it read something like, those who are not enrolled in continuing school, because that was the rich people's school, the continuing schools, they would have to go to this public institution. Do you know why? It wasn't to make them better. It wasn't to help them learn. It was so that these street urchins would learn how to live in proper Protestant society. The first public school was designed for social control. And I'm going to be honest, I don't think a lot has changed in the interceding 400 plus years.
No.
Think about it, what we do in educational circumstances. What other species, besides for survival of food, tells their young just to sit down and don't move over a course of time? That is not how we explore. That is not how we learn. That is how we get trained to be good employees later on. That is how we get trained to think about the way I remember there's this several memes going around, but I remember this one in particular. There was this teacher who was sending this letter home about why the student was getting detention or suspended. And the issue was that the student was arguing with the teacher. The teacher said, like, miles are 1,057 miles when it's supposed to be 57 feet when it's supposed to be 1,064. And he corrected him, and the teacher was like, no, it's this. And he went back and forth with the teacher. In the note that when he talked about the student's disrespectful behavior, the teacher says, granted, he was correct, but he should not have challenged my authority in that way. And it was very disrespectful. The lesson, and the parent posted it to be like, no, I support my kid because they did the right thing. But guess what? Think about what that lesson teaches. Yeah. He got in trouble. That means that even when you know the person in charge is wrong, just go along with it. That's the way you stay out of trouble. That's not the way you innovate. That is not the way you create leaders. That's the way you create drones.
Yes.
That's the way you create people who say things like, well, I was just following orders.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we're going to talk about kind of these things, because what you're talking about, the way you're talking about your experience is that your parents took a vested interest in deprogramming you.
Yeah.
To not just getting you jumped on consequences, outcomes, and judgments, to be like, well, how did we get here?
Yeah.
Because that is how you lead, that level of analysis, that level of engagement, and that level of decision making.
Yeah.
So
I agree. I agree. It's funny, like what you're, to jump on what you're saying. If you look at people like Damon John and Richard Branson, they're both dyslexic. And they both in their books and in interviews, they both explain how they weren't good at math or they weren't good at school and they were D students. And even Gary Vee tells everybody, he was a D- student in college and in high school. And so some people might take that as, okay, so I don't really have to do the work in high school.